Alrighty guys, as promised today we're going to be touching on how to build a bird team. Alright, so in the last video was basically my favorite team that I run at the moment, kind of a clear that I thought was pretty straightforward, which was nice. So today I wanted to kind of touch on maybe like some of the teams I started with. Definitely didn't have obviously the one ultimate Escanor when I first started doing the bird. And there was a few other heroes that I had, and there was actually kind of like a basic team that I built. Like if you're just starting out in the bird and you're just trying to like clear it for the first time, or maybe you struggle a little bit with them, I'm going to show you the teams that I've used, that I have used successfully, and that I can definitely use again. So let's get stuck into it. So welcome to Hraesvelgr. As always, I'm sure I butchered that. Let's get stuck into a team, shall we? So that is my current team, as you guys know, that I currently use. Let's start with Hraesvelgr. So just like Yorm for the deer, when we did that deer video, you want to basically use Hraesvelgr, right? There's no real replacement for her in the bird team. It's pretty much like if you have her, you can do bird. If you don't, then it makes it very difficult unless you're a pretty heavy whale, alright? And you're probably not watching this video. Like I've seen people do it with a full goddess team without Hraesvelgr, but like their CC was like 320k or something crazy, right? So like you don't, like if you're a free-to-play player, or you maybe just started the game, or you're still trying to find out how to do bird, you pretty much want Hraesvelgr or bust, right? Like she's designed for the bird. We'll quickly touch on her passive. So her passive is basically anytime your ally's HP is full, you get an increase in all your stats by 8%, right? This is helpful because obviously she has a heal card. So I run her with attack defense because I want her to survive first off, but then I also want her to have a better attack because that heals more, right? So this will then mean that you want to basically use this as much as possible, right? So every time you heal, you kind of want to be healing your team to full health, because then you get the passive going. If you have the Holy Relic, then just you remove a debuff and you automatically apply that stack. So then you can get that stack, and then if you full heal, you get the stack. But it's you need to, if you don't have the Holy Relic, which you might not, you need to make sure try and heal everyone to full HP, right? Especially towards the harder parts of the boss. So that's Hraesvelgr, right? She's pretty much a staple for the team. Then we kind of have a few other different roles, right? So you kind of have like a tank role that you want to fill, or like maybe a taunt role if you're not going to use the one Escanor and bypass the taunt stage like I did. Maybe your Escanor's not built, maybe you don't have Freya's death ult, high leveled, whatever it is, makes sense, doesn't matter. You want to have a taunt unit. So the best taunt unit for this boss is Halloween Matrona. And the reason why I say that is because she has a 3-turn taunt on level 1, right? Which is awesome. Makes it a lot easier to do that second floor with a taunt, and also just allows you to not have to worry about getting too many taunt cards while you're playing through the game, and she can just obviously be a designated tank. She also does have a removes buff card on level 1, so as the boss gets later in the phases, if you're not kind of, two-turning it, you'll pop up like evasion and increase in attack and all this kind of stuff. So being able to remove those buffs is really, really helpful, and allows you to actually then attack him as well straight away. Her ult is nothing special. You don't use it for ult, you use it for a taunt and a remove buff. Her unique is also really helpful. So if every 1% of the hero's diminished HP, you increase your regeneration rate. So basically the less HP Matrona has at the end of the turn, she'll then help the whole team regen and heal up a lot, right? So that's a passive healing almost that Matrona brings. So she was a staple pick for me whenever I first started using the bird. Now, we'll touch on some alternatives, but very quickly, you guys want to make sure you are using blue Tarmiel, right? Not red Tarmiel, if you're doing a taunt hero and you're not one-turning phase 2. I made this mistake when I first started, but basically, if you have red Tarmiel, as I said in the last video, his Grace kind of stuffs up the bird's one-shot ability, where it will still potentially one-shot you even though you have a taunt up. So if you're doing the bird and you're using the taunt hero, make sure you're using blue Tarmiel. Alternates for Matrona. I was really enjoying using Deanne, Festival Deanne, if you have her, for a while. Now my Festival Deanne's only 1/6, doesn't matter, but she has a taunt card. Only 2 turns, but it's still a taunt card. But she can dish out a lot more damage than Matrona can. So she's a good kind of substitute for Matrona in terms of being able to, you know, actually do some damage. Whereas Matrona's kind of just there for a taunt and her passive heals. One thing to be aware of though is when you get to the final phase, I think it's final floor phase like 3, when we were talking about how he cancels like stances and stuff. Matrona's is actually a buff. This is a stance. So the first turn, the bird will cancel these stances for you. So that can get annoying because then you no longer have your taunt unit, right? Whereas if you have Matrona, wherever she is, as you can see, her taunt is actually a buff, right? Not a yellow card, it's a blue card. So that makes that final part a little bit easier as well. So those are kind of my 2 recommendations for the 2 taunt heroes. I mean, anyone with a taunt that you've got built will work, right? Like if you've got, let's see if we can, no, it's not going to let us defense stance, counter stance. Like anyone that has a taunt card, like you can even use wherever Green Deanne is. Right, Green Deanne has a taunt. If you've got her built, you can use her as well. But honestly, Red Matrona is the pick, and then if you've got a built and you're just looking for a bit more damage, you can use Festival Deanne as well. Cool, so next is your kind of your DPS role, right? This is the role where you're going to dish out a ton of damage and you want to basically push through that final phase of the first floor where you need really strong like damage, right? So the best card for this is actually a Power Strike card or an Amplify card, right? So Trader Melee was always my favorite pick if you do have Trader Melee, because as I said last time, his passive always helps the whole team as well. So I would run Trader Melee and then would run with Sariel Link, right? So when you crit, you need to make sure you have a few stacks of passive up though to do more damage. Like if you're trying to be a little bit more consistent, you'll need a bit more luck when it comes to RNG cards, because if you have a built Trader Melee, you can kind of get away with maybe like 2 silver cards or do a decent chunk of damage plus Miguelda's ult. But if you do want some like more consistency from your cards, you can actually use something like, where is she? Brunhild, right? So Brunhild has a Power Strike card. You probably would want, you know, 2 to 3 silver cards at least, as well as if you've got a Brunhild built, and you need a bit more stacks on her passive as well, on Miguel's passive, sorry. But Brunhild is a great option. Her ult also heals your team. My Brunhild patiences, even with a 6/6 ult, I believe, on on the final phase of floor 1. So, but a good option as well for DPS. Again, you'd want to run her with Sariel Link, but she could definitely be there as an alternative option. You can also just use Sariel, right? Wherever there he is. He has a Power Strike card, as well as if you've got his Holy Relic. Every time he hits a crit, he increases his base stats, which is really helpful. And he has a Sever card, so you can basically build up his Holy Relic as you're working your way through, and then just Power Strike. But look, even if you don't have his Holy Relic, maybe you're not doing Deer and you don't have it, that's fine. He still has a solid Power Strike card, which you can use as well. Again, my personal favorite is always going to be Trader Melee, just because his passive and like his stats, he just hits so hard, is crazy. So you can use him. You could use the one Escanor, but I'm probably going to talk about him more on the supporting slot unit, because he can hit damage and he can be consistent, but you need quite a lot of, like, he needs to be basically fully maxed out on his passive. You need to have basically max Miguelda stacks. So Trader Melee, Brunhild, or Red Sariel, I think are all good picks here. Alrighty, so finally we have like the support slot unit, right? So this is a unit where maybe you want to have another damage dealer, right? So as you saw on my other team, I ran the one Escanor. Maybe you want to have just a straight up support unit that can, you know, increase what you do. So I actually used to use Green Arthur in this slot. So my actual original team was Green Arthur, Trader Melee, Matrona, and Miguelda. And it actually worked quite well, because what happened was Miguelda obviously is the bird, Matrona was my tank, Meliodas was my DPS, and then Arthur just kind of kept everyone alive with his passive increase in damage and decrease in damage taken. So it's always allowed like me to have really high tank ability throughout the boss. Obviously not the best in terms of DPS. Melee is pretty much your only DPS unit there, but he can, like, this team can definitely work, and this was the original team that I used, right? Alternatively, if you're running something like this, again, you could even, you know, bring along Brunhild as well, right? You've got a taunt, a tank, right? This is kind of like your flex part of the build, because you can bring along another DPS, you can bring along a support unit, maybe, I mean, you can even bring up like a rank up unit if you really want to, right? Maybe you want to bring Hraesvelgr. Like this is a kind of a flexible unit, flexible spot, sorry. As I mentioned last time, you can even use Arthur as a tank, right? You can put him in the tank slot and give him, at this point you'd give him Tamio Link, right? And the reason for that is because he's not a taunt unit. So what that means is you're gonna have to one turn the second phase on floor 2, which means you'll need to bring something like a, I mean, you could bring a Freya because he's got Death Ult, right? You need a higher duped Freya or the 1 if you're going to do that, because you want to hit damage cap preferably twice, so then you can just continue on through. So you could bring the 1, you could bring the 1 Escanor, you could bring what I did, the ultimate Escanor, right, and just use 2 fingers with the damage cap. So if you use Arthur as a tank, which is again what you guys saw me do, you would need to bring some sort of death hero, right, to balance out the team so you can get through the second phase. To keep it easier on yourself, if you don't have those heroes duped, or you don't want to try and one phase that second phase and you want to give yourself a bit more time or a bit more kind of breathing room, bring a Deanne, bring a Matrona, give them blue Tamio Link, and then that'll give you a bit more time, right? And then yeah, you can fill the slot with a Sariel if you want for an extra damage, Brunhild for extra damage, and then the utility of healing, right? Arthur for his passive. So this is kind of a slot that you can play around with, but you know, make sure it's benefiting your team. Don't, you know, necessarily bring, you know, this Gotha, right? Because his passive's not going to work because he's going to get AoE'd. He won't be able to disable the enemy attack. The rank up can be helpful, but it's not going to be enough to kind of warrant him having that position, right? You want to make sure you bring a unit that's going to be beneficial to your total team. And that's it, guys. So like I said, you've seen the team that I'm kind of using at the moment. The original team that I did use to kind of start me off on the bird was this setup here. All right. As I said, I've had friends and I've used it myself where I've replaced Arthur with like a Brunhild for some extra damage and the healing as well. Like I said, I think Green Arthur's slept on, and I think his passive is really helpful in things like this. I haven't used him much in the deer, to be honest. It's mainly been a bird hero for me, but this would kind of be something like my setup, right? And obviously, like, I didn't really touch on it in my last video, but if you guys are going to do the bird, you kind of want to have at least level 90 fully super awakened and then UR gear. You can do it with, you know, 5+5 gear, 5-star plus 5 gear, but it's really going to make your life a bit more difficult. People like Trader Melly, right, is someone you can invest into. Magelda, you kind of can do. Arthur, there's lots of different Arthurs, right, so it's not a bad idea to invest in him, but maybe, you know, you've invested in Escanor, right, and that can be your team, right, and you can run full UR gear. So I hope that helps, guys. Let me know if there's any kind of different variations that you guys use in the comment section below, and I will catch you in the next one.